All right, so welcome to the third episode of the Three Amigos. And the Three Amigos are, as per usual, Andrei Zaretski, who is the keyboard player of the Toronto-based prog metal band Driftglass. Obviously, the coolest instrument in that band. And then also with me is JP Revel, who is beyond a financial director of LiveNation, the talented drummer of the Iron Maiden cover band Piece of Maiden. JP, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jasper. How's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. Now that I can talk to you guys, I feel much better. All right, so we've got another topic, obviously, for this third podcast. So we've got a very interesting topic. We'll tell you in just a little bit what we're going to talk about. But first, let's see what the team has brought to fuel this conversation. JP, what are you drinking tonight?
We're going to be drinking homemade beer, craft beer made at home. That's the latest one. It's called, I called it Big Bertha because of the explosion of malt in my mouth. It's Munich malt German beer, dark. It's dark ale, and as I said, very malty, but very tasty at the same time. So about 6% alcohol. That's what I'm drinking tonight. Cheers.
Awesome. Andrei, I see that you just opened your beer. What are you pouring right now?
I did indeed. I'm typically not a fan of this one, but I was feeling adventurous. It's cold now where I am in snowy Maple, so I went with a
yes, let's hear Andrei speak French.
You know what? I used to have my moments. La fin du monde.
La fin du monde. La fin du monde. Awesome.
Yeah, so you'll have to excuse the Quebecois accent. That's the only one I know.
It's a great beer. Great beer.
It's a good beer. It's 9% alcohol. Comes from the great province of Quebec, and
awesome.
I might get drunk tonight.
All right, and for those metalheads out there, Unibrew, which is a brewery that makes La Fin du Monde, has obviously a lot of great beers. Maybe my favorite beer from that brewery is Dôme de Dieu, but they also have the collaboration with Megadeth for the À Tout le Monde. I brought with me the Wraith, a black lager from Common Good in Toronto, or I should say, I don't know, is this Scarborough still or North York? But one of the 6 boroughs of Toronto.
This is, you're right,
cool.
Scarborough beer, and I actually collaborated with them when I worked at a home builders association. We did a custom brew for
nice
for the National Home Show.
Awesome, nice. Well, so yeah, I forgot to mention, besides being the keyboard player of Driftglass, Andrei is one of the most respected, most wanted, most asked marketing gurus of Toronto.
I think you're exaggerating a little bit over there, but I did want to brag a little bit since we're talking about beer. I have recently done another collaboration, and I'll when I get a chance, I'll share it with you. But it was done through a local brewery in Hyde Park that was used to promote a condominium development on the Ossington Strip, because I figured Hipsterville, craft beers, and we just ordered another batch of 600 beers. Proved extremely popular, and they're actually really solid. So I'll pick up a couple of beers for you guys to try.
That sounds good. Love it. All right. Well, hey guys, before we get started in another fight to talk about what we think is the best music out there, let's cheers to our friendship, to the Three Amigos, to heavy metal, and to good times. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, boys.
We are ready for today's topic, and I just want to say to JP, and I think that Andrei will agree with me, a genuine I hate you for bringing this topic to the podcast.
I hate myself too.
As you know, JP came up with the idea for the discussion of today, and the discussion of today is what is the best metal, or well, whatever, album of the decade for each decade, starting in the 70s. So the three of us had to do a lot of thinking, and spent sweat, blood, and tears to to come up with the best album of the decade for 5 decades. So the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. We are going to limit ourselves to talk about our main choice. We will, share with the audience who are our runners up, because I do believe that all of us will have a good amount of runners up for each decade.
But I think we're only allowed to share one, right?
Well, yeah. Let's keep it as to the point as possible. So if Andrei, when you pick an album in one of these decades and you want to share with us, like, hey, these were the other albums that I was really thinking about, that's fine. But we're gonna do our best not to get distracted. We'll only discuss your top pick, but feel free to share which contenders you have, because this is a really, really, really hard question. And with every fiber in my body, JP, I hate you for making me go through this exercise.
You're very welcome.
So JP, as this was your wonderful idea, I suggest, by the way, guys, that we do this chronologically. Shall we start in the 70s and work our way back? Yeah. All right.
Makes
so
sense.
JP, why don't you kick us off with your pick for the 70s? And feel free to share some runners up. But what, according to you, is the greatest album of the 70s?
Yeah, so it is an AC/DC album. It's Let There Be Rock. It's their 1977 album. That's my pick. My runner-ups were Machine Head by Deep Purple and Rainbow Rising. The two of them, hard to decide for number 2, but for me, clearly Let There Be Rock is my number 1. I know there's in the 70s, it's hard to tell what is heavy metal versus
100%.
hard rock. So I think, but this is the heaviest AC/DC album. There's some pretty heavy songs. Whole Lotta Rosie, Let There Be Rock. If you think about the main riff of Let There Be Rock, it sounds kind of a metal riff, the on the guitar, very heavy. But yeah, for me, it's my favorite album of the 70s. The track list is great, from the opening track of Go Down with a count from Phil Rudd on drums. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the main riff. And then, as I said, like fans, favorites, Let There Be Rock, Bad Boy Boogie, Problem Child, Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be, Whole Lotta Rosie. Like songs they still play on tour these days. Like they haven't stopped playing because they're so strong. And I feel like there was a turning point in the band's career.
Mm-hmm.
They were more into boogie rock style, and they went into heavier rock through this album. I know they went back into boogie rock with the next album on Power Age, but still, that's where I think they found their real style.
You make a good point there. Like, so this album was followed by Power Rage, which for a lot of fans, including myself, maybe my preferred 70s AC/DC album, but it was like that one turn back to like the more rock and roll style, where Let There Be Rock was really the moment that AC/DC went from like, a couple of drunks that play party rock and roll to like arena hard rock, right? Although my favorite song on that album is actually the exception that proves the rule with Bad Boy Boogie. I just love that song so much.
It's a great song.
It's a great song. Andrei, AC/DC, is JP onto something? What are your thoughts?
Me not being an AC/DC fan per se, I wouldn't rank it in my top 5. But and I know JP's going to disagree with me on my picks, as it's not a band that he overly enjoys. But my top pick for this one is Sad Wings of Destiny by Judas Priest. I absolutely adore that album for several reasons. One, I find that as far as heavy metal in general goes, it's definitely the formation. Some would say it's Stained Glass, which is my runner-up for that particular decade. But Sad Wings just had that beautiful fusion of progressive rock and traditional heavy metal stellar production. I own the original 1976 release on vinyl, and it's incredible. And then, as I said, Stained Glass is my runner-up, and a not-so-distant second is Long Live Rock and Roll by Rainbow.
It's interesting, right? Because I agree with you, Andrei. Sad Wings is one of the first true heavy metal albums out there. Because a lot of the early heavy metal albums, between quotation marks, it was like, okay, there's 2-3 real heavy metal songs and the rest is like psychedelic rock or blues rock or whatever. It's definitely one of the first proper heavy metal albums. But if you look in the grand scheme of things of the Judas Priest career, a lot of Judas Priest fans might love that album, but if you think about, okay, if you have to make a list of the top 10 hits of Judas Priest, there's not with maybe the exception of Victims of Changes, there might be no song of Sad Wings on that list.
I do see your point, although I think part of the reason is just because they span so many decades as a band, and there's so many hits that they prefer to.
For sure.
But I'm just looking at the track list right now. I mean, Victim of Changes is one of their biggest, but The Ripper and Tyrant.
One of the greatest opening riffs of all time with Victim of Changes. Come on.
I think
it's a great song.
He admits that that's a good song.
You're saying that. I told you before, like Priest in the 70s is great.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with their albums in the 80s, but I agree with you. So.
But Andrei, as you're looking at that track list, and I can be wrong, right? Because I'm just looking at you right now. But as far as I remember, it's a great album, but how lopsided is that album? Because the A side of that album is ridiculous, where the B side of the album is pretty good. But if I'm mistaken, like call me out if I'm mistaken. But side A starts with Victim of Changes, then you've got The Ripper, and then you've got both Dreamer and Deceiver, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's hard rock or heavy metal heaven right there.
Yes.
But I don't even remember the songs of the B list.
I may be biased because I really like the album, and when I listened to Unleashed in the East, it was largely composed of songs from Sad Wings, and I found Tyrant to be an incredible song.
Right.
Yeah, Tyrant is great song, especially Unleashed in the East. Oh my god, that live version is fantastic.
Yeah. So do we all?
Tracks,
go ahead, Andrei. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say the other tracks. I mean, Genocide and Island of Dominations they deserve to be on a B side.
Well, I mean, if your first 5-6 songs are what they are, then who the hell cares? But do the three of us agree that Sad Wings is Priest's 70s greatest album, or is it Stained Glass? I think it's Sad Wings, but I don't know about you guys. I mean, I think I know what Andrei says because he picked this as the greatest album of the decade. But JP, what do you think?
Yeah, based on Victim of Changes and Tyrants, I would say, it would be my favorite Priest album anyway.
Okay, cool. I just want to say, I'm surprised that neither of you have called out Black Sabbath before.
It was.
I know it's tough. So I'm only gonna give 2 runners up. I had to call out as a runner-up, Paranoid by Black Sabbath. I know that not every song is a metal song, but come on, Iron Man. That alone, that is phenomenal. Fairies wear booths. Paranoid, obviously, itself. War Pigs, come on. It's phenomenal. And I thought that you guys would call it out. But anyway, that's my runner-up. But that's actually my third pick because I was really, really torn between 2 albums. And the album that I didn't choose just because I was counting the songs that I say these are ridiculously immortal songs, and one had more than the other. So my second runner-up, or my first runner-up, I should say, is Jailbreak by Thin Lizzy. The boys are back in town, sure, rock song, but Emerald, what a fucking amazing heavy metal song. Or the Cowboy song, so good. Then also obviously Jailbreak, the song itself. My number 1 pick has to be any day of the year, Machine Head by Deep Purple. It's just so good. There's even the B-side of the singles are A Blind Man Cries, which was the B-side to Smoke on the Water. is so good. Highway Star, Smoke on the Water. But let's not forget Lazy. If we're talking about Richie Blackmore's guitar playing in Lazy is just so good. So for me, and I get it, what JP said is absolutely right. Is this really heavy metal? Some of it is. Highway Star.
I think it's fair. It's it is.
Some of it is definitely heavy metal, but some of it is blues rock. Some of it is just whatever. But it's tough in the 70s. So I would say that out of the three choices that we had, AC/DC, Deep Purple, and Judas Priest, Andrei has the most metal choice. No doubt about it.
Yeah, Machine Head is, as you said, the track list is great. The production, Martin Birch. I just finished Adrian Smith Autobiography. And
so for those of you listening, this is the probably 10,000th time that in 1 week Andrei and I have to hear about Adrian Smith's biography that JP is reading right now.
No, he was Megadeth. That was 2 weeks ago, but he's super hungover one morning, and you get a call at 8 a.m. from Martin Birch, who's still drinking rum at the studio and hasn't slept, and says, "Yo, come back to the studio and we're going to record your solo for Power Slave." And what Adrian says is, you don't say no to Martin Birch. You don't say to the guy who recorded Machine Head, you don't say no. So anyway, that was my quote of Adrian. But yeah, I agree. It's my runner-up. It's a great album.
Would we all agree that Martin Birch is probably the most influential producer in heavy metal?
Yeah,
I would say that he's the most influential producer in
hard rock,
or just even in music in like the 70s and the 80s. I'd 100%. Like, yeah.
I don't know enough about other genres to comment. That's why I said
that's fair. That's fair. But if you just look at, the list of albums that he's worked on, it's not just heavy metal. Like, he worked with Fleetwood Mac, he worked with Blue Oyster Cult. Like, it's any of the greats to come out of the 70s and the 80s had Martin somehow, connected to them. So 100%. And he's one of those people that a lot of people don't know him, right?
Yeah.
Regular people listening to music don't necessarily know who was the producer of an album, but if you, and I actually do have, I actually created a video on my channel when he passed away, of some of his most influential works, and made a playlist as well. And if you listen to that, it's like, oh my God, like, every song is just like, that is such a classic. So a great influential person, even if he was a flamboyant person, but he stayed behind the scenes also, which is kind of cool. But yeah, all right. So,
and just to finish on the 70s for me.
No, go for it. Go for it.
You mentioned Black Sabbath. Yeah, I would say Sabbath might be the most influential band, but there's not one single album that I would pick. Like, I would pick one from Master of Reality. I would pick a couple of songs from Volume 4. I would pick a few songs from Paranoid, and so on and so forth. But there's not one album in the 70s that I would say like changed my life, or is what I think is the greatest album. Anyway.
They have a lot of filler, and I think that's just part of the amount of drugs that they were doing. But there's every album has like 3 or 4 incredible songs, and then just some songs that are like, I just don't get it.
But Andrei, you were talking about the track list of Judas Priest before. Let me just walk you through the track list of Paranoid, okay? We start off with War Pigs, then you have Paranoid, then you have Planet Caravan, then you have Iron Man, then you have Electric Funeral, you have Hand of Doom, then you've got that lousy Rat Salad instrumental shit, and then you've got Fairies Wear Boots. That's pretty crazy.
So why isn't it your first pick? I
will tell you, it wasn't even my second pick, because I mean, anybody who hasn't listened to Thin Lizzy, go listen to Thin Lizzy right now and play Emerald. If you want to hear an amazing song, like if you want to hear a good guitar solo, listen to Emerald. But then if you look at Machine Head from Deep Purple, now granted it's a year later than Paranoid, so Paranoid does have that on what am I saying? Has that on Machine Head. But if you then look at Machine Head, okay, starts off with Highway Star. You have Maybe I'm a Leo, Pictures of Home, Never Before, Smoke on the Water, the one song that everybody learns to play guitar to, then Lazy, and then Space Trucking, which, by the way, Iron Maiden covered in a really cool way. And then Knowing That When a Blind Man Cries didn't even make the cut. I rest my case. So, okay, 80s. I'm gonna apologize straight away because
Not acceptable.
I have 4 runners up that I'm just gonna throw out there that I think are amazing albums.
Too many.
I know it's too many. It's only gonna get worse. No, that's not true. But
I have to open another beer. I don't think I'm ready for this.
All right, in alphabetical order, my runners up are Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, which is ridiculous, great. The Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, which caused me pain. And I was like, because my favorite Iron Maiden album might be Peace of Mind. But if I have to look at it in the bigger picture, Number of the Beast is probably the more, the classic one, but not my number one. I also put in there because just personally, I had so much fun with it, and I love almost every song. Kings of Metal by Manowar, which is so good, and I think you all know which song I'm talking about. And then, I know it's not Sting of the Bumblebee, and then also Master of Puppets by Metallica. So those are my 4 runners-up. My number one pick, and I honestly, this pained me so much, maybe more than any other decade. And I eventually went with the album that as a kid, I just, I was just in love with. I played over and over and over again. And I went with Ride the Lightning by Metallica. It's, for me, the ultimate album of the 80s. The artwork, the production, the variety in the songs. And it really was... It probably was like the album that made me from some kid that listened to rock music to a kid that was like, no, I want to only hear metal from now on. Yeah,
it's a great pick. It was not in my runner-up, but the 80s is so hard.
It's so hard.
We had in our first episode, we talked about thrash metal. We talked about the impact of Ride the Lightning, the track listing, the artwork. I love it. I have the T-shirt as well. No, it's a great album. I would definitely put it in my top 10 of the 80s. More like lower on the list, obviously, but it's a great album. That's not my pick. But Andrei, what do you think?
I mean, I'm gonna get hate for this, but I am not a huge fan of Ride the Lightning. I like the album. I think it's a great album, but it's not even my top 3 Metallica album.
I mean, I hate you already, but that's okay.
Creeping Death. Just for Creeping Death.
Creeping Death, Escape, Trapped Under Ice, Call of Cthulhu, for whom the fucking bell tolls. But hey, Andrei, if you don't like Ride the Lightning that much, tell us what are your runners-up? What is your number one pick for the 80s?
My top pick of the 80s, you guys will disagree with, but you kind of know which one it is. In terms of Ride the Lightning, I like Ride the Lightning.
Is it Poison?
It's every room.
Look what the cat dragged in.
First of all, Ride the Lightning is a great album, but Master of Puppets and Kill 'Em All are better. I would rate it on par with the Black Album, just because at the time it had such a great influence on me. But whatever, that's not what we're talking about here.
Not yet, at least.
Not yet.
Give us your picks.
The 80s were very difficult. I love Iron Maiden, and I love everything about them. That's why my 3rd runner-up was Master of Puppets, because, I mean, who doesn't love Master of Puppets? Number of the Beast, Jasper, was my other runner-up. I share it with you. It is just absolutely incredible. But Somewhere in Time is my favorite all-time Maiden record by my all-time favorite band. I couldn't stop. This is one of those albums that I bought when I was 18. I went to Russia and I bought it at, they're selling bootleg CDs somewhere outside a subway station. I'm like, oh, I like Iron Maiden. I want this thing. I listened to that thing endlessly. Basically, my entire week in the country, I just had my earphones in listening to that thing on repeat. The entire plane ride home, it is just incredible. The production, the way that Bruce sings, just a complete change up in the style. And it's so quintessentially 80s without incorporating some of that 80s cheese. I mean, you might disagree with me there. That is my...
The greatest thing about Summer in Time is the cover artwork, I would say.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, yeah. And
it's really
Alexander
fun.
the Great.
Well, yeah.
Oh, Alexander is such a solid track. And actually with Summer in Time.
Well, I mean, there's no bad track on that album. Even like
Summer in Time is
even
just...
like ridiculous songs like The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner.
Oh, I love that song.
Which are
very underrated.
It's stupid, but it's still good.
I love it.
Yeah, it's good. It's a great album. Okay, so JP, your thoughts here.
I'm with Andrei. Iron Maiden is my, obviously, ultimate metal band, my favorite band ever.
Mm-hmm.
In my runners up, I have Heaven and Hell as well. That was really, really hard.
I know,
to pick that album. It's a great album. My second runner-up, or my first, if you want to put it, was Raining Blood by Slayer. As you know, this is my favorite ultimate thrash album. We talked about it in episode 1, so I won't talk about it again, but these were they were tied for second. But yeah, my number 1 pick is another Iron Maiden album. But for me, it's Power Slave.
Knew it.
Yeah, I knew what you were going to pick for the 80s and the 70s too. And I know what you're going to pick for the 90s. Anyway, for me, let's talk about the track list first. Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight,
I hate
Lost
that
for
song.
Words. Yeah,
Really?
It's been overplayed live, but if you actually listen to the record, it has such a nice groove. Now they play too fast, and you have too many guitars. But if you actually listen to the album, it sounds great. Then Aces High as an opener, it's the greatest song to start a concert. Great. And then the closer, The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Just read the lyrics, listen to the song.
I love you, JP. I know how much you love The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and I love you for it. I love that song. I'm pretty sure Andrei loves that song. And Power Slave, which is the track before that, is also really great. It's a weird song, but it has one of the, in my personal opinion, Power Slave, one of the greatest Iron Maiden guitar solos of all time. Especially the second
Adrian.
one. Yeah, exactly. However, it starts so great with Aces High, and I'll give you 2 Minutes to Midnight is a fun song. I think it's overplayed. And it ends with Power Slave and Rhyme. But in the meantime, you have to go through Lost for Words. You have to go through Flash of the Blade.
No, I don't agree. The Flash of the Blade is the Flash of the Blade is the only weak song on the album. The Duelist is so good. Listen to Adrian solo. Listen to
I love it when JP gets energized.
Listen to the bass part on the Duelist.
Yeah.
Steve's work is great. There's maybe one filler, Flash of the Blade, Back in the Village. That's it. But the other songs are...
Guys, I like Flash of the Blade. Back in the Village is a little, but Flash of the Blade is fun.
And the Duelist is great. Lost for Words is a fun instrumental song.
But if we're like, let's take a step back and let's be professional here. We're talking about the Duelist and Flash of the Blade. When you think about the Number of the Beast, it starts terrible with Invaders, which is a horrible song.
Yeah, but and Gangland.
Let's not even... Okay, so Invaders and Gangland are terrible, but then you've got Children of the Damned, The Prisoner, 22 Acacia Avenue, The Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills,
and you have
and Hallowed Be Thy Name,
Power Slave,
and Hallowed Be Thy Name. Like I would say that I hear you. Like personally, Peace of Mind and Killers might be my favorite ones, just because They were the albums that I really discovered Iron Maiden with, but Number of the Beast has to be the number one album in the 80s for Iron Maiden. Although Power Slave made Iron Maiden into a global phenomenon.
And the cover.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I personally like the Power Slave cover even better than Somewhere in Time. Although Somewhere in Time might be my favorite Eddie.
Do we agree that Iron Maiden is the ultimate band of the 80s?
100%. As a quick recap, we did the 70s and the 80s, and so far, none of us are crying, which is a good sign. Because I was afraid that this would be much.
Oh, I cried before. I don't have any tears left.
I'm crying on the inside. Okay.
I believe that. So, just as a recap, I think even though we all had different picks, we kind of agreed that Judas Priest is the ultimate 70s heavy metal band. It was Andrei's number one pick with Sad Wings of Destiny. JP went for AC/DC with not Highway to Hell, but with Let There Be Rock, and I went for Machine Head by Deep Purple in the 80s. We all agree that Iron Maiden is the ultimate heavy metal band, although my personal pick would be Ride the Lightning by Metallica, and Andrei and JP both went for Iron Maiden albums, JP for Power Slave, and Andrei for Somewhere in Time. It's time to pour another drink. I'm gonna go with the Runner Duck, which is a lager by Common Good. JP, what are you pouring? Another homemade brew?
Yeah, the same. Big Bertha. I'm gonna stick to my German Munich malt.
Sounds good. And Andrei, I know that you've opened a few Unibrew beers tonight already. Are you wasted already, or are you pouring more beer?
Oh, I'll be pouring more beer until I can pour no more beer.
Sounds good.
So, fin du monde all night, and it's going to be a fin to my evening after I fall down and
Sounds good. So that's a good way for us to go into the 90s, the third of 5 decades that we're going to cover today. Andrei and I started one already, so JP, why don't you tell us which albums were your runners up for the 90s and what was your number one pick?
Okay, so my runners up were, I'd say number 3 was Arise by Sepultura, 1991 album. We talked about it again in episode 1, one of my favorite thrash metal albums. So I'm not gonna talk about it again. My number 2, surprisingly, is going to be Rust in Peace by Megadeth. This is surprisingly because it's my number 2. It was a tough decision. I'm sure we're going to talk about Rust in Peace in a few minutes. But yeah, my number one pick is the first Rage Against the Machine album.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Just blew this whole thing wide open.
Wow.
I'll go back. Same to you, Jasper. I'm going to talk about my journey. This was a huge slap in the face when my friend in junior high, I can't remember how old I was, like 14, played that record at home, and I was blown away by the sound of the
Just a fun fact, in the 90s in France, a slap in the face is considered a sign of affection.
Yeah, probably. Exactly. But yeah, blown away by the sound of the production, the instruments, just like the little details. If you listen to the hi-hat on the whole album, it's the sound of the guitar, the riffs, the vocals, like it's so powerful, so strong. It's really, really made a huge impact on me, on why I love metal. And then the track listing, Know Your Enemy, Bomb Track, Freedom, Wake Up, Bullet in the Head. I don't think there's a single weak song on the album.
I can't believe you just went through that track list and did not call out Killing in the Name of.
Well, because it's overplayed. It's like Iron Maiden is like, yeah, Run to the Hills. But yes, you're right. When it came out,
but Run to the Hills is a really cool song.
Anyway, the cover. Look at the artwork. I was like, is this real? I had to at the time there was no Google, so I had to go to the library and do some research on what that was. I took my history teacher and told me the history about it. And
so for those of you that don't know, on the Rage Against the Machine cover, you see a picture of a monk in Vietnam burning himself in protest against the Vietnam War.
It's that when I sat down, I did my list. I first did not include that album, and then all of a sudden, it all came to my mind. I was like, it has to be this one. It has to be this one for me. So anyway, I'm done. I already talked too much, but
no, that's okay, man. Hey, first of all, JP, don't worry. We will edit everything that you say out of this podcast, so that's okay. It's the album also that I don't know if this is the right word, but justified rap rock, and it was like the start of new metal in a way. Like, Rage Against the Machine had to come out and had to be taken seriously for Body Count, for eventually Korn, Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, all these guys to come out, because they did pave the way for some weird stuff and bringing a funk vibe to heavy metal, and to make the circle round, one of so far the best rock releases in 2021 is the new Pretty Reckless album of Taylor Momsen and her band, and one of the latest singles is actually a collaboration with Tom Morello, and I'm personally not a fan of his guitar playing. It's just not my thing, but I will recognize how good he is. And if there has to be a list of the top 20 heavy rock or metal guitar players or influential guitar players, Tom Morello has to be on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at what blew me away the first time I bought the record was really at the back. If you read it, it says no, I can't find it, but on the CD it says no samples, keyboards, or were used for the recording of this album, and I just couldn't believe it. For me, it was like knowing that all of that came out of this guitar. So anyway.
So Andrei, JP couldn't believe it. What could you not believe of the 90s?
So I'm gonna have to add Rage Against the Machine to my runner-up.
I told you forgot albums from the 90s. You're like, oh, the 90s suck. It's so easy. Man, so many good albums.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. It was not easy. My two runners-up, and I couldn't decide. Chemical Wedding and Accident of Birth, both incredible Bruce Dickinson albums. That reunion with Adrian was just a match made in heaven, and he created some incredible masterpieces. Both brilliant albums. Dare I say, rival some of Maiden's best releases.
Andrei, I just want to say I love you for bringing up these albums, because honestly, as much as you guys know how much I love Iron Maiden, and you guys know how much I love Bruce Dickinson, but I would have never thought to list these albums. And they're such gems. They're such overlooked gems. And
to be honest, I remembered about these albums. I think JP brought it up, and I'm like, oh my god, this just
like Accident of Birth is
the best Maiden album in a span of 15 years.
I mean, Dark Side of Aquarius, like, how good is that?
Yeah.
People that are listening that have not listened to Bruce Dickinson's solo albums, stop listening to us and play.
Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Shame.
Play Bruce Dickinson's solo albums.
Road to Hell.
Honestly,
Man of Sorrows.
I'm super happy that Bruce Dickinson is back at Iron Maiden, but if I could get a solo tour of Bruce Dickinson still while I'm alive, I would love that.
Yeah, I've never jizzed in my pants in a mosh pit before, but I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So
what's your pick?
What's your pick?
JP knows what it is. I'm gonna
I think I have an idea too.
My first runner-up, which this was actually a really hard one because I'm on par. My first runner-up is Painkiller by Judas Priest.
Ooh.
It was an incredible album. I find that whole 80s poppy, I'm your turbo lover, just it was right for its time in the late 80s, but then when Painkiller came out, they really reestablished themselves as a true metal band, hard-hitting, leather studs, wailing screams, crazy guitar solos. It was incredible. But, and this is no surprise, but this is one of my favorite albums of all time, and Rust in Peace. How absolute flawless album. I cannot even... The only song that I dislike about it, I mean, you know, I don't need Mustaine reading poetry to me, but even then, that bass line is so fucking cool.
Dawn Patrol is awesome. It's a great tune. What are you talking about?
JP,
Bass is amazing.
Andrei's album.
No, I know, but he's saying, I don't like poetry, or I don't like Mustaine reading poetry and that bass line.
But,
yeah, but
anyway, did you include?
you
included it in your
second
runner-ups.
part.
Yeah.
I said I don't need Mustaine reading poetry to me, but that bass line is still fucking awesome.
So this is interesting. So awesome. Thank you, Andrei. I know that JP and I were expecting you to pick that album.
Of course.
You
guys know me well.
We know you, and I'm gonna make myself unpopular by saying that Rust in Peace would not be my top 5 of the 90s, and I'm gonna make myself even less popular amongst these guys. There are amazing songs on Rust in Peace. There's amazing songs in there. Unfortunately, there's only 3 good songs on this album, and there are 6 bad songs on this album. So I think that Holy Wars, The Punishment Due is amazing. I think Hangar 18 is amazing. I think Tornado Souls is amazing. The other songs just don't like. I mean, I'm not saying that they're terrible, but they don't really do anything for me.
Lucretia.
Take No Prisoners, Five Magics, Poison Was a Cure, Lucretia, Dawn Patrol. You know, I think there are 3 ridiculously great songs on that album, but that's it.
How do you sleep at night?
I know.
That's why I drink to sleep at
Take
night.
No Prisoners is so good.
Let me share my picks. I've got a few runners up as well, as you guys do. I only have one runner up that is later in the decade, and that one is Legacy of Kings by Hammerfall, which is 1997, the return of European power metal. If you love power metal and you have never heard Legacy of Kings, check it out. It is a ridiculously good power metal album. But if I then look at my top picks, and I'm surprised this one hasn't come up, Vulgar Display of Power by Pantera. I mean, if there is a 90s band, it has to be Pantera. With Walk, fucking Hostile, it's up there. My second runner-up, or my first runner-up, depending on how you look at it. And the only and so I was so torn. I was so torn.
Sorry for bringing up the topic.
No, that's okay. That's okay, JP. I already hated you. The only reason that I didn't pick this album as the greatest album is because it's not really a metal album. It's more a hard rock album. And it has to be 10 by Pearl Jam, which is such a good album. Like, every song is phenomenal. And then my number one pick, and I almost was like, I don't want to pick this album because I'm the basic bitch that chooses this album, but
if
it
you say
is
the Black Album, I swear to God.
I am saying Metallica by Metallica, because here's the thing. It is, first of all, production-wise, it's the best produced album of all time. Number one. Second, every single song on that album is phenomenal, and it was the album that made Metallica into a big metal band, into the biggest band of all time. And as much as people like to hate on it, I mean, obviously, I personally prefer the 80s thrash albums of Metallica, but is there really, if we're honest, is there really a bigger metal/hard rock album of the 90s than the Black Album by Metallica? Like, let's be
No, but
honest. Like,
is the question bigger or is the question better?
But
If it's bigger, I
I'm
would
also,
agree with you. But
no.
better.
But I'm also thinking like,
Nickelback your 2000s pick too.
no, it's not. It's not. But close. No, I'm kidding. But it's also like it's almost like it's almost no problem. But it's almost like it's politically correct to hate on Metallica in the 90s. But if you really think about it, about the album itself, right? It is an amazing album. It's the album that made hard rock and heavy metal into like, a respected thing. And if you just look at the track list, Enter Sandman is one of the most iconic songs in history. Sad but True, Holier Than Thou, The Unforgiven, Wherever I May Roam, Don't Tread on Me, Through the Never, Nothing Else Matters, Of Wolf and Men, The God That Failed, My Friend of Misery, and The Struggle Within. There's no weak song on that album. It's an amazing album, and it was almost too easy for me to go like, oh no, obviously I'm not gonna pick the Black Album. But you know what? Damn it, I have to give it to Metallica. It is like it became a thing. Like you can tell with other bands that's their Black Album, and when you say that, it doesn't mean, oh, that's the sellout album. It doesn't mean that was the shitty album. It means that is the album that made them into superstars. That's the album where they got everything right and they accelerated. Again, I love Ride the Lightning more. I love Master of Puppets more. I love Kill 'Em All more. But if I have to look at the 90s and if I have to look at what is the ultimate, and also like as a teenager, I knew every single song on that album back to front, no words. I know every lyric of every song.
Right.
That was my album. I'm sorry. I know I'm a basic bitch.
No,
but
that's your
my
pick.
album.
That's fine.
For not being afraid of criticism, because while not everybody that's listening to this understands this, but this pick will haunt you and ridicule.
Which is why I also added Hammerfall.
But good job, man. You got bigger balls than both of us. I agree. I think it's a phenomenal album. That's why I 10 minutes ago or whenever said that it's in my top 3, probably above Ride the Lightning. Mm-hmm. But is it really better than Rust in Peace? Is it? I
personally think so. I honestly do think so, because I and what I said earlier, it was a bit of a joke, but I do stand by that comment. I think that Rust in Peace, first of all, Rust in Peace, best Megadeth cover art of all time. So good. Color scheme is great. But I think the 3 best songs of Megadeth's career are on that album. Yeah. That I just find that the discrepancy between those best songs and the rest of the album is so, and that kind of stood out for me the other day when I what's the name of, and you guys will probably know this better than I do, but what's the there's a live album where Megadeth just plays the entire Rust in Peace album and then a few other songs.
Rust in Peace Live. That's
is it Rust in Peace Live? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe that's the one. So I have that. I have somewhere in my collection. I've got that album, and especially live, it becomes clear so quickly how okay the other songs are. Like, there are 3 phenomenal songs on that album, and the rest is okay.
But those 3 phenomenal songs are better than all the great songs
on the Black Album.
On the Black Album, Metallica became the biggest band in the world, and they did that by creating some amazing songs. And when I was, in the 90s, I was born in 1984, so I went from 6 years old in 1990 to 16. And if I'm honest, the album that I played the most in those years was the Black Album, closely followed by Hammerfall, because I fucking love Hammerfall. And Pantera. Like, I can't believe we talked about Rage Against the Machine. How did we not talk about Pantera? And I know that
it never did anything for me. Like,
really? Like, come on.
Pantera.
Yeah, same. I can't relate.
All right.
And as you said, like the Rage Against the Machine album for me is the one I played the most in the 90s, and that's why I picked it.
And I didn't even list my Limp Bizkit choice.
Significant Other? Come on.
Dude, I played that album so many times. All right, before we get started with the 2000s, let's recap this real quick. I think, and this is hard though, because again, we all picked albums that were pretty early in the decade, because even if, let's say for 1 second that JP, who chose Megadeth, Rust in Peace, as his second favorite, and Andrei chose it as his first. So like in statistic-wise, we should say like, okay, our favorite album is Rust in Peace. I think it's a great album, don't get me wrong. Was
it in your runners-up? I don't think it was.
It was mine. It was mine. I limited, it wasn't JP's, I limited mine. If I would add more runners-ups, Rust in Peace would have been there. But metal changed so much in the 90s. That would we comfortably say that it is the album that defined the 90s, Rest in Peace, because metal changed so much? That's what I mean. Rage Against the Machine, Korn probably has, or let's not forget, Tool, System of a Down. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we've got 2 decades to go. How is everybody's beer situation?
I'm still sitting upright, so I'm okay.
All right, I have to jump out and grab one thing. I'll be right back, and then we'll go into the 2000s.
You go ahead. We're going to talk so much shit about you when you're not here.
2000s. By this time, we're all spotty teenagers. We've got zits on our faces. We are awkward to ask out girls. We're, at the start.
I was in my 20s already. So.
Well, you were still awkward. I was
still awkward.
I was 16 in 2000.
I was 20
because I'm from 1984. But Andrei, 2000s. Who are your runners-ups and runners-up? And who is your number one pick for album of the decade?
The 2000s were the most difficult one for me. They really were. Because I didn't realize how many amazing metal records came out in the 2000s and just the 21st century as well. We always think of the 80s as the epitome of heavy metal, but there was just such an incredible resurgence after the 90s.
Absolutely. Creative explosion.
So I'm going to start off my runner-up with the most obvious choice, which is Brave New World. Incredible album. I think we can all agree it was something just magical with the return of Bruce. I don't have to go back into it. I think we all know how much we like it. My second runner-up was Wages of Sin by Arch Enemy. When I first heard it, I was like, you can't tell me that this is a woman. So powerful. That growl was incredible. And up until then, I'm sure there were women growling in death metal bands, but
sure.
Angela was just one that really took it to the next level and was incredible. This was just something else. My second runner-up, first runner-up, my big one, and this is a controversial one, but it's Dark Passion Play by Nightwish. You guys know Nightwish is one of my favorite bands of all time. There was a lot of controversy around Annette Olson and her singing, which was a lot more generic than her predecessor, but there was just something incredible in the songwriting in general, and that opening track is just so powerful. I must have listened to it on repeat at least 100 times when it first came out. It was just so powerful. And now JP's gonna start shaking his head. My album of the decade, yes, it's from the early part of the decade, but it is Mutar by Rammstein. When I first heard that, it was actually in 2001. I was blown away. I've heard Rammstein before. Everybody knows Du Hast and what they did with Sehnsucht, but just they came out with the strings, the incredible show, the visuals. That's where they started creating these magical videos. And at that time, it was to read the lyrics and actually see the
100%
all this wordplay and everything. Till's incredible voice, a great example of basically the opposite of the 90s, of my 90s pick and even my 80s pick, where musicianship took a step back, technicality took a step back, and it was all about that catchiness and just doing more with less.
Here's the thing though. I'm gonna say, like, I agree with you, Andrei. Like, Rammstein, one of the biggest rock bands of the 2000s, like, hands down. And the fact that they do it in German
It's crazy.
is just so amazing. And I agree with you. Like, Mutter is a great album. It's one of the few albums that I would give 100 out of 100 score. And to jump on your bandwagon here, Mutter is my number one pick as well for the 2000s. So
wow.
yeah, there you go, high five. So I mean, if I just like Mutter, I mean, Rammstein obviously brought, like, the electronics and the industrial music to metal, and they've been doing that since the early 90s. Well, 95 was their first album.
There's that fusion.
But they still are huge and one of the biggest bands out there. Also, by the way, never had a lineup change in all their time. Like, amazing. Mutter is a ridiculous album. If you think about it, starts with Mein Herz brennt, which is great. Links 2, 3, 4 is fantastic. Sonne, Ich will, Feuerfrei, Mutter, Spieler, Zwitter, Rein Raus, maybe my favorite song of the album. Adios and Nebel. This is an amazing album. So Andrei, I agree with you.
That's the first.
It is the album. I will actually, really quick before we pass it on to JP to tell us why we're both extremely gay, but and nothing wrong with being gay, by the way. But my runners up, and I have a few, and I'm just gonna rapid fire them at you guys. Slipknot with Iowa, one of the greatest albums of the 2000s. I mean, so good. With their debut album, they brought this weird new metal thing, and it was kind of cool. But with Iowa, they brought, like, death metal all of a sudden. It was awesome. Satyricon, Now Diabolical, black metal, great album. Sabaton, The Art of War. I mean, if there is one band that, and maybe more in the 2010s than the 2000s or the 00s or whatever, but Sabaton, let's not forget about Sabaton. I also have Brave New World as a runner-up. Like, I mean, Iron Maiden, their comeback, Bruce's comeback. Brave New World is one of the greatest Iron Maiden albums of all time. It's so good.
I'd be disappointed if one of you guys didn't have Brave New World.
No, it's so good. I have two more runners-up that I want to highlight real quick. Perseverance by Hatebreed. Hatebreed is one of the bands of the 2000s. In an era where everything was about the new wave of American metal, Lamb of God, Trivium, Killswitch Engage, those bands. Those were the big bands. Hatebreed. Can we please talk about Hatebreed? How awesome was that band? How awesome was that album? And then I also have 01011001 by Adrian. Which I think, is one of the greatest heavy metal albums, or I think it's the greatest prog metal album of all time. Sorry, Andrei, that I don't call Driftglass the best prog metal album of all time, but Adrian has to be called out. But yeah, no, for me as well, my number one pick for the 2000s, Rammstein with Mutter. JP, why do you hate us right now?
I don't hate you. I love you guys. But you see, it's funny, Andrei, you talked about it. For me, it's the lack of technicality that really, that's probably why I can't get into Rammstein. I don't get it. It's just me. Personal choice. I'm not saying, oh my God, this is terrible.
Well, I mean, Rammstein was the band that said, like, screw guitar solos, a riff is more important. Yeah,
but still, riffs are not so complex, and like, if you want to talk about riffs, let's talk about Megadeth, like, great riffs, but
the exact opposite of Megadeth.
Yeah,
Sorry.
And that's why I have a hard time with it, and that's just my personal choice. It's just I'm probably insensitive to it.
Rammstein brings a show that only an Alice Cooper and a Kiss can bring. Like it's incredible. It's an event, and like, I mean, there's a simplicity in Rammstein that is powerful.
It's incredible, and I think it's the idea of, similar to what the Black Album did, is they stripped it down, they made it simple, and they made these catchy melodies fusing industrial with metal, combining those two kind of subcultures, and then just bringing an incredible show. And then by injecting the strings and the orchestra elements into it in the 2000s, I think that's what set them over the top. Plus, obviously, the videos were incredible.
The videos are so good. But the songs are good too. I mean,
they're really good. Sorry, Jasper, I'm going off track. I'll admit, I have never listened to Hatebreed. What was the album that you really liked? I'm just going to mark it right now.
Excuse me. Perseverance from 2003. It's the album that has I Will Be Heard and a couple of other songs. I mean, I'm a big Hatebreed fan, and I will enjoy a lot of Hatebreed albums. They have some really good albums in recent history as well, but if I were to pick one album that really defines Hatebreed for me, it's Perseverance. I mean, I grew up as a hardcore kid, so I was into hardcore before I was into metal. And so Hatebreed is a perfect band for me because they bring this metalized hardcore, you know? Awesome. JP, what's your number one pick? Or what are your runners up? Sorry.
Yeah, runners up. I'll go with Creator, Violent Revolution.
Not Enemy of God?
You know what?
That's his favorite.
No. We talked about it, and when we talked about comebacks, and I picked Enemy of God, and then I listened to Violent Revolution again after that. And as much as I love Enemy of God and the production, but the first 4 tracks of Violent Revolution are so good. All of the Same Blood, Reconquering the Throne.
All of the Same Blood is so good.
Even the first 5, like I didn't. Yeah, Servant in Heaven, King in Hell. Anyway, so great album. My second runner-up is gonna be Mastodon, Leviathan.
Oh.
Again,
Wait,
going back to
which
the
album?
Leviathan. Sorry. Leviathan. Sorry. Too much beer and my French accent. Leviathan. I apologize. You're gonna edit that. I'll do that again. My second runner-up is Mastodon, Leviathan. Okay.
Close it up.
I can't say it.
I'm just gonna make a video of like this over and over.
I can't say it. Leviathan. Sorry.
It's a great album.
Leviathan. Sorry,
JP. I didn't mean to make fun of you.
No. That's fine. People make fun of me all the time. Just kidding. Yeah, I love for me, it was really a revelation because I thought I was really into 80s metal, and then I didn't think like new bands that would come out would produce something that good, that powerful. I was always into like older bands making great albums in the 2000s, but actually Mastodon came out with that album and I was like, this is great. So anyway, going back to my number one pick, I have to go with, and again, going back to my personal journey and the impact it had on me on metal, it has to be Follow the Reaper by Children of Bodom.
Interesting.
I love the album. Before I made my decision, I had to listen to 3 albums before, and just it won by a mile every time. Every time I listen to it, it's like Andrei with Nightwish. I could listen to some songs like 100 times in a row and never get tired of it. If I go,
it's a great
opening
album.
track, Follow the Reaper, and then Bottom After Midnight, and then there's so many good tracks like Hate Me. How many times have I played Hate Me?
Yeah.
I just love it. The song, the guitars, all the solos on, Kissing the Shadows.
I was about to say Kissing the Shadows. Exactly. Every Time I Die. Like, I would almost say that Follow the Reaper is a great song, but it's like, that album is great because it gets better the further you get into the album. Like, Follow the Reaper is a good song, but it's okay compared to Bottom After Midnight. It's okay compared to Every Time I Die. It's compared to Mask of Sanity. It's a cool song.
Yeah,
like I hear you. It's a great album. It becomes better the longer you play it. Hate Me, Northern Comfort, Kissing the Shadows. The end of that album is really phenomenal.
So production is great. Third album by COB. Alexi is at his best. I really love that album. Honestly, I listened to so many albums for that. I think that was one of my hardest decades to pick. I listened to so many albums, and every time I had to go back to that one. And again, an early one because it's 2001.
No, we keep picking the early ones. We still have one decade to go. JP, what are your picks for the best album of 2010s decade?
This one is another tough one. I went back and forth. So my runners-up are Power Trip, Nightmare Logic.
Yeah.
Unbelievable album. Jasper, I know we talked about it. You're the one who introduced me to Power Trip. It was mind-blowing the first time not the first time I heard the album, but since I've listened to the album, every time I listen to it, I think it's phenomenal. I highly recommend that album by Power Trip. The second one would be The Satanist by Behemoth. Oh my god, what a crazy album. Again, the production, the track listing, the singing, the album cover, everything is so good. But for my number one pick, I have to go with Gods of Violence by Creator. Creator is just like a nice Bordeaux wine that's gonna get better and better and better with age. If you go back to the greatest song by Creator in the last 20 years, I think is Line with Eagle Wings.
100%. Greatest
song. So good. You have Hail to the Hordes, Army of Storms, Fallen Brothers,
good album.
Satan is Real, Gods of Violence. There's so many good songs, and production is great. The two guitars with Sammy and Melee, and that's my. I love Creator, as you know, but I have to say, that's my favorite album of the last 10 years. Everything is so good about it.
I'm gonna say right now, I'm gonna give it away already that that album is one of my runners up. It is so good, and it's so hard to pick because there's so much good metal coming out in the last 10 years. Like, we are really lucky. Like, we talk about the 90s and we don't talk about the 90s. We talk about the 80s all the time about how good the 80s were for metal. The 2010s were fucking amazing for metal. So I hear you, buddy. Creator, Gods of Violence, phenomenal album. But Andrei, what's your pick there, buddy? This was a tough exercise.
It was, and as I'm drinking my third 9%,
holy fin du monde.
I am feeling, I don't know how to say drunk in French, but
there are many ways that you heard. You are bien chaud.
Bien chaud.
I am feeling bon.
Bien. You are feeling bien.
Bien. Ça va bien.
That was a sarcastic thing. You guys probably think I'm lying, but not that bad. I did complete my OEC French. Okay.
Congratulations. I'm proud of you.
Actually, no, sorry, I failed my OAC French. I did not get my university equivalency. But okay, the 2010s. This was tough. I will admit, there are not a lot of albums from the 2010s that I particularly loved. I don't have any albums that were just like, oh my god, I listen to this every day for X amount of times. But there were some really good albums in there. My first runner-up was "Woe to the Vanquished" by Warbringer.
Okay.
Thought that was
Great album.
The other runners-up, "Endless Forms Most Beautiful" by Nightwish. I love Nightwish, so I'm a little bit biased, and I've always loved Flor Jansen.
Oh man, 100%. Like that was an album that is gonna be really hard for Nightwish to ever top.
Yeah.
Like that was phenomenal.
That was incredible. I found that album was they were trying to recreate the magic that they had on Once, which is more kind of commercially acceptable. They went a little bit too hipster on the the name escapes me, Imaginarium.
Yes.
And then they went way too hipster on their last one there, Nature Music. But,
yeah, that was a bit of a disappointment, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I still enjoyed it.
Andrei, I know how much you love Nightwish, but let's be honest. Their greatest album of all time is Endless Forms Most Beautiful. It's better than Wishmaster. It's better than whatever.
I don't agree with you there, but we'll agree to disagree. I like one of their. I personally like Century Child. I love that album. That's just because that's what I discovered at a very specific time, and it was very dark and whatever. Anyway, we won't get into it. My top albums for 2010, I had a really hard time choosing between the two, because I love both of these albums so much, and it's literally like 0.1%. My two choices were "Dark Roots of the Earth" by Testament.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And "Iconoclast" by Symphony X.
Ooh. Wow.
That is unexpected curveball.
Yeah.
Nice.
I had to give the edge to Symphony X just because Dark Roots
You're a
of the
keyboard player and you like prog metal and
No, not at all. Not at all, guys.
You're so biased.
I love thrash, and Testament is one of my favorite all-time thrash bands.
I know you do.
So incredible. But the thing is, Dark Roots, I found, kind of followed a formula that Testament has been using throughout the 2000s.
Definitely.
While Iconoclast just took Paradise Lost, their previous offering, which was incredible, and just turned it up to 11. It was different. It had a lot more symphonic elements. Russell Allen is just his absolute best. The guitars, everything, like that album is flawless. I can't say anything about it. I absolutely love Dark Roots of the Earth. I probably listen to Dark Roots more just because it's easier to listen to. But Iconoclast is an absolute masterpiece. I can't.
Yeah, no, I think that's a
I'm gonna
great
stop
pick.
talking now because I can't say anything more about it. It's amazing.
It's a great pick. Russell Allen, one of the greatest singers of all time.
Anything this guy does.
Let's just agree on that. Dark Roots, yeah, good album for me. For me, it's like I never really give it the credit that it's due because I just like the formation of Damnation so much, which came out a couple of years before. I think 2007, 2008. I don't know. So a different decade, quote unquote. But a good band, and I think that Andrei, yourself, myself, I think JP, I think the three of us were all big Testament fans, and If you look at American thrash metal, I think we all agree that Creator is probably the best thrash revival band. But if you look at American bands, Testament, probably the best one, even better than Overkill, better than Exodus. They're a great band.
I love Brotherhood of Snake.
I find Testament to be a better thrash revival band than Creator.
Ooh!
Oh, no way! You can't say that.
Ouch!
I'm sorry for.
You can't say that.
Here is my justification, and I'm going to start an argument here. I know, but
Sure, 2.5 hours in this podcast. Let's start an argument.
Creator did something magical, but they kind of continued doing the same thing that they were doing in the 80s. They had a little break in the 90s, and then they continued it with better production, better whatever. With Testament, I find they completely redefined themselves. The singing style, the production, everything was just so different. And when they brought in 2001, they re-recorded their classics with First Strike Still Deadly. Mm-hmm. And they basically said, this is who we were, this is who we are now, check out our new style. And everybody was like, okay. And then they came out with just some solid albums. So Formation and Damnation, Dark Roots of the Earth, Brotherhood of the Snake. I'm not going to talk about Titans of Creation because I know there's a bit of controversy there, but just absolutely solid. And every time I have seen these guys live, it's just been flawless. Just absolutely flawless. And everything that this band has endured, from Chuck Billy's near-death experience in the 90s to half the band's near-death experience last year with COVID, just it's been amazing. And plus, like, I mean, how incredible was Testament winning? They won an actual Aboriginal award for Native Blood.
There are a surprising amount of really cool metal bands that have, to use a pun, Native Blood. But I would say that some of the best Testament is actually from the 90s. Like, if you listen to Demonic, their album from 1997 with the Burning Times, that is pretty fucking awesome. But anyways, I'm not here to give you a hard time. Testament, great band. I agree. Symphony X, it's one of those bands that never really gets the full appreciation. Maybe because proggy heavy metal in the last few years has not been that popular as it was in the 90s, maybe. All right, so let me give you my picks, and I'll let you guys, make fun of me.
We're looking forward to it.
We never do.
You guys just did to me.
So a couple of albums that already were called out. The first album that I'm gonna call out is Beyond Hell, Above Heaven by Volbeat. I kind of lost interest in Volbeat a little bit in recent years, but in the late 2000s, early 2010s, they were the new band. They were the band that were redefining things. They had a different sound, super popular in Europe. They're playing for massive venues. Beyond Heaven, Above Hell, great album. Anyway, also In Waves by Trivium, phenomenal album. I think it's from 2013, I think. Anyway, great album. Also JP, absolutely, Nightmare Logic, Power Trip. What a phenomenal album. Like,
unbelievable.
If Creator didn't exist, the greatest thrash metal album of the 2010s. Because obviously my next pick is Gods of Violence, Creator. What a really great album. I know that you and I have talked a lot of times about which one is better. Is it Phantom Antichrist or is it Gods of Violence?
Gods of Violence.
At the end of the day, I think it is Gods of Violence, right? But Phantom Antichrist is so good too. Another album that really stands out for me is the Quantum Enigma by Epica. Such a great album. Obviously, the band is doing really well right now with their new album Omega that was just released. But Epica, if you haven't listened to it, I would say my favorite symphonic metal band. I do think that they are better than Nightwish, but Andre and I will never agree on that. But check them out. And then I have one more runner-up from 2010, The Wicked Symphony by Avantasia. And this is unfair because Avantasia obviously is not really a band; it's a project. It has the greatest singers, participating, so it's kind of unfair. Probably every Avantasia album I really like, but specifically the Wicked Symphony, I think it's such a good album. But my number one pick, and it has been mentioned before, but I could not, and I know JP that you're laughing because you know what I'm gonna say, but I could not see any other album to choose but The Satanist of Behemoth. Like it's just. And I know, like, it's crazy, like, it made Behemoth like this big star, and Nergal is, as annoying as he is funny, but he's an awesome dude. And this album, just think about that, the fact that JP called it's his first or second runner-up, and I call it my favorite album, the fact that it's a very extreme blackened death metal album tells you something. Like, metal is more extreme today than it has ever been, and it's resonating to more people than it's ever been before. And if you look at the track list of The Satanist, it's ridiculous. Like, it's funny because if you're gonna watch Behemoth play live right now, and let's say that on a show they'll play 10 songs, 6 of those songs are gonna be from The Satanist.
He was my first pick until 2 days ago.
Yeah,
I changed it.
Such a good album. It's such a good album, and I'm really glad that that album and that band has become so popular and so successful, because it's not a mainstream rock band. It's not a very easy to digest, album. It's fucking Behemoth, and I'm really happy for them for all the success they've had. I love it. I know they've got a lot of hardship they have to deal with. It's not easy being from Poland and being a black metal band and all that kind of stuff. I know that right now the band is in a bunch of lawsuits because they are quote unquote being blasphemous and what have you. But how awesome is The Satanist?
Unbelievable. It was so hard not to pick that album.
Overrated.
As much as it was hard not to pick Nightmare Logic. What's that?
Andrei's saying overrated.
No, that album is.
It's so good, Andrei.
Mind blowing.
So good.
Listen to it.
Mind blowing.
Don't see the appeal, but that's just me.
That's fair.
It's just like me with Rammstein, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it is. I don't judge you.
I agree with you. I'll admit it. It was my number one pick for the last week or 10 days, and then I went back and forth between Creator, and then I just put the track list side by side, and I just realized Creator was stronger, but like really like 1 millimeter. And yeah, I agree with you. It's a great album.
I mean, if we think about it, right? Like, because we've been going through the track lists, right? Blow Your Trumpets, Gabriel. It has been since South of Heaven that a metal album started with such a menacing opening riff. Like,
I remember that.
Like, that is such a good. And then Furor Divinus, Mess Noir, Ora Pro Nubis Lucifer, which is my favorite song of the album. Like, Feel the Universe, Scream. Like, so
I prefer Ben Sahar.
I know, and then don't forget about the actual song, The Satanist, or In the Absence of Light. And then to end this song, the song that they end their regular live set with, O Father, O Satan, O Son, which is such a good song.
Unbelievable. The lyrics are mind blowing, and then when he sings it,
Andrei,
tell us why we are wrong.
I just find it just screams I'm trying too hard. It's the whole idea, like, I find that it contradicts the entire kind of vision behind black metal that was developed in the 90s, and it's that whole we don't care.
I agree with you to some extent, because let's be honest, like Nergal has become the new Corey Taylor of metal, and before Corey Taylor, I don't know who it was, but like he's the poster child of heavy metal right now. And then you can ask yourself, like, how quote unquote black metal is that still, right? Like if
even if you just listen to the songs, like forget about Nergal.
It's an amazing.
No, I'm talking to Andrei. Like, I don't think he was trying. The guy recovered from leukemia. He had you were like, oh, Testament. They had that near-death experience with COVID. Like,
hold on there for a second, JP. Don't forget that Chuck Billy of Testament had actually a brain tumor.
Yeah, true. No, I agree. No, I'm not downplaying it.
We don't have to compare other people.
No. I'm not downplaying it. What I'm saying, what you're using as an argument for Testament.
What I'm saying, JP. What I'm saying is that I think that Behemoth. I chose that album as my favorite pick. So
I was just responding to Andrei.
I know. Yeah, Nergal is a big character right now in the world of metal. You cannot deny that.
Instagram is ridiculous.
He's on Instagram. It's like there's nothing black metal about him, but it's also like he's advocating for an individualistic, a rebellious lifestyle, what have you.
Freedom of speech.
I think
women's rights.
I think he's legit. I think he's absolutely legit. I'd love to interview him.
I have nothing against his message. I like the guy. I think he's cool. I think it's amazing that he's using his success to develop a positive platform. I like that he's rebelling against, the marriage of church and state in Poland, and that he's bringing this whole kind of black metal thing into the mainstream. But just for me, I find the album to be overproduced. I find it to be really fake. I don't know. I don't find it authentic. I'm listening to it and it's like, dude, are you really trying that hard? Like,
I don't think he was trying though. I think it just came out.
Maybe. I mean, it could be. Maybe it's also all the hype around it that's just.
There is a hype. Let's be realistic here for a second. Like, there is a hype around Behemoth. Behemoth is one of the bands, right? That doesn't mean it's not genuine. Like it's. And Andrei, I'm going to. I'm the story I tell myself, and you're talking about, what you think is wrong with this album is, like you say, it's too produced. I think it's finally a fucking well-produced black metal album, and I think it's going to be very challenging for any extreme metal band to do better than the Satanist. Nothing will ever be as good as the Satanist. Like, that is their Master of Puppets or Black Album or whatever. Not to open up, a previous conversation.
The salt in my wounds.
Let's wrap this up. So, we started in the 70s.
Just teasing you.
Well, I mean, we were kind of scattered, but I think if you really listen to all of our runners-ups, there's a lot of connection points there. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. We definitely had a lot of fun, talking about our favorite picks, even though it was a terrible, terrible exercise to list these albums. We needed a lot of beer. All of us are pretty drunk right now. But we thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We'll have another episode next month. We'll let you know via the Belgian Jasper Instagram page what will be the subject of that conversation. And I'm going to say let's have Andrei pick the next subject, because when JP chooses subjects, it just causes so much pain. So Andrei will pick the next subject for us to talk about. You'll see it all on the Belgian Jasper Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast. And hey guys, JP, Andrei, thanks for a great evening to talk about.
Yeah, it was fun.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Hey, you guys got your revenge. You made fun of my French accent. So It was good revenge. So you got, I gave you trouble.
Can you just say Leviathan one more time?
Yeah, I'll try. Leviathan.
There we go. Woo! All right. So
what did I say? I said.
If you made it this far in the
what did I
podcast,
say? Leviathan.
Leviathan. There you go.
What did I say the first time? I can't remember.
you said something. You said something. Leviathan, whatever. But
Leviathan.
right.
Oh no, I said Leviathan.
If you made it this far into the podcast, we want to thank you so much for listening. This is why we do it, to make, to give you guys a good time, either on Buzzsprout, on Spotify, or on YouTube. Feel free to leave comments and let us know what your picks are for the best albums of the decade. And thank you, Andrei. Thank you, JP. This was a lot of fun.
It was awesome.
And yeah, we will make sure that you guys, in the description, you'll find the link to the Spotify playlist of the best songs of all these albums that we called out, to give you an amazing, amazing heavy metal and rock party for the next few days. And we will talk to you next month, in the next episode of The Three Amigos.